The phone's shrill ring pierced through my peaceful Friday night like a knife. I was curled up on my couch, wine glass in hand, watching some mindless reality TV, when that sound shattered everything. You know that feeling when a call comes at midnight? Your heart stops because you know it's never good news. "Is this Rebecca Martinez?" The voice was professional, cold. "Police?" "Yes, this is Rebecca." My wine glass trembled in my hand. "Ma'am, we need you to come to Pine Ridge Mountain immediately. Your nephew has been abandoned here." The words hit me like a freight train. Jake? My brother's 5-year-old son? "I'm sorry. What do you mean abandoned?" "A woman left a child here about 2 hours ago. The boy says his name is Jake Martinez and that you're his aunt. He's in pretty rough shape, ma'am." I was already grabbing my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip them. "I'm on my way. Please, just stay with him." Have you ever gotten a call that completely changed your life? Because in that moment, staring at my reflection in my hallway mirror, I knew nothing would ever be the same. The drive to Pine Ridge felt like an eternity. Every red light, every slow car ahead of me felt like torture. My mind was racing. How could Karen do this? How could anyone do this to a child? But deep down, I wasn't entirely surprised. My sister-in-law had always been unpredictable, selfish. But this was beyond anything I could have imagined. The mountain road was dark, winding through trees that seemed to close in around me. My headlights cut through the darkness, and with every mile, my heart pounded harder. What condition would I find Jake in? How scared must he be? How long had he been alone up there? When I finally reached the scene, I saw the police cars first, their red and blue lights painting the trees in an eerie glow. And then I saw him, this tiny figure wrapped in a police officer's jacket, sitting on the tailgate of a truck. Even from a distance, I could see he was filthy, his clothes torn, his face streaked with tears and dirt. My heart shattered into a million pieces. Every parent, every aunt, every person who's ever loved a child knows that feeling when you see them hurt and scared. It's like someone reaches into your chest and squeezes until you can't breathe. "Jake," I called out, running toward him. He looked up, and those big brown eyes, so much like my brother's, were filled with a confusion and pain that no 5-year-old should ever experience. And then he said the words that still haunt me. "Aunt Rebecca? Mommy said I'm not wanted because of her new husband. She said I have to stay here because I'm too much trouble." I dropped to my knees and pulled him into my arms, feeling his small body trembling against mine. He smelled like fear and abandonment, and I could feel his little heart racing. "Oh, sweetheart, that's not true. You are wanted. You are so wanted." But even as I held him, comforting him, making promises I hoped I could keep, I had no idea that this moment of rescue was just the beginning. I had no idea that 10 years later, this decision to save Jake would trigger a war I never saw coming. The legal paperwork felt endless. Emergency custody, child services interviews, medical examinations. Jake had been neglected, not just abandoned that night, but for months before. The pediatrician found signs of malnutrition, poor dental care, and what she gently called emotional distress indicators. In other words, my sister-in-law had been failing this child long before she dumped him in the mountains. Karen had a pattern, the social worker explained. She'd had 2 other children before Jake, both removed from her care for neglect. She'd always found ways to get them back, usually by playing the victim, crying about how much she'd changed, how sorry she was. But this time felt different. This time she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "Where's my mommy?" Jake asked me that first night as I tucked him into the guest bed I'd hastily prepared. "She had to go away for a while, baby, but you're safe now. You're going to stay with me." "Forever?" The hope in his voice nearly broke me. "For as long as you need, sweetheart. For as long as you want." Those early months were a whirlwind of adjustment. Jake had nightmares, panic attacks when I'd leave for work, and an overwhelming need for constant reassurance that I wouldn't abandon him, too. I cut back my hours at the marketing firm, turned down a promotion I'd been working toward for 2 years, and reorganized my entire life around this broken little boy who needed everything I had to give. But slowly, beautifully, he began to heal. His laughter returned first, tentative at first, then louder, more frequent. He started calling me Mom Rebecca, then just Mom. He made friends at school, joined Little League, learned to ride a bike in my driveway. Watching him transform from that terrified child on the mountain into a confident, happy kid was the greatest privilege of my life. Every achievement felt like a victory we'd won together. His first A on a spelling test, his first successful bike ride, the first night he slept through without nightmares. Each milestone was proof that love really could heal trauma, that stability really could undo damage. Years passed. Jake grew taller, started middle school, developed an obsession with baseball and video games. He had my brother's smile and his mother's stubbornness, but most importantly, he had security. He knew where he belonged, who he could count on, what home meant. By the time Jake turned 15, I'd almost forgotten about Karen entirely. Almost. Then she showed up. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October. Jake was at baseball practice, and I was in the kitchen starting dinner when the doorbell rang. I opened the door expecting a delivery or maybe a neighbor, but instead found myself face to face with the woman who'd haunted my nightmares for a decade. Karen looked different, older, tired, but well-dressed in a way that suggested she'd landed on her feet financially. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, but there was something desperate in her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "Hello, Rebecca." Her voice was eerily calm. "I'm here for my son." The audacity of it took my breath away. "Excuse me? Jake, he's my son, and I'm here to take him home." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You have got to be kidding me. You abandoned him. You left him on a mountain like garbage." I was in a bad place then. I've changed. I'm married now, stable, and I want my boy back. She pushed past me into my living room like she had every right to be there. "Where is he?" "You have no rights here, Karen. None. You signed away your parental rights years ago." "Actually," she said, pulling out a folder from her designer purse, "I never signed anything. The abandonment charges were dropped, and I've been getting my life together. I have a lawyer now, and he says I have every right to reclaim my child." My hands were shaking with rage and fear. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything Jake and I had built together. Not after he'd finally found peace. "He doesn't even remember you as his mother," I said, my voice barely steady. "He was 5, Karen. You were supposed to protect him, and instead you traumatized him for life." "Children are resilient. He'll adjust." She was walking around my living room now, examining family photos like she was evaluating real estate. Besides, blood is thicker than water. I'm his real mother. That's when I heard Jake's key in the front door. My heart stopped. He wasn't supposed to be home for another hour. "Mom, I'm home. Coach canceled practice because of..." He stopped dead in the doorway, his backpack sliding off his shoulder and hitting the floor with a thud. The silence in that room was deafening. Jake stood there, 15 now, tall and lean from baseball, staring at the woman who'd abandoned him a decade ago. Karen's face softened into what she probably thought was a motherly expression. "Jake, oh my God, look how big you are. You're so handsome, just like your father." She took a step toward him, arms outstretched, like she expected a hug. Jake's response was not what she expected. He looked at her for a long moment, his face completely blank. Then he turned to me and said, "Mom, why is this stranger in our house?" The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Karen's face went white, then red, then white again. "Jake, honey, it's me. It's Mommy. I know I was gone for a while, but I'm back now, and I'm here to take you home." Jake looked her up and down with the devastating honesty that only teenagers can manage. "You're not my mom. My mom is standing right there. She's the one who raised me. who stayed up with me when I was sick, who taught me to drive, who comes to every single one of my games. You're just the woman who left me on a mountain." Karen's composure cracked. "You don't understand, Jake. I'm your real mother. I gave birth to you. This woman—" She gestured at me with contempt. "She's just been babysitting." "Babysitting?" Jake's voice rose, and I could see the anger building in him. "Babysitting for 10 years? Babysitting through every birthday, every Christmas, every scraped knee, every nightmare? Lady, I don't know what planet you're living on, but in the real world, that's called being a mom." I'd never been more proud of him in my life. But I could also see Karen's desperation turning into something darker, more determined. "Fine," she said, her voice ice cold now. "If that's how you want to play it, we'll let the courts decide. I'll see you both in family court. And Jake?" She looked directly at him. "Whether you like it or not, I am your mother, and I will get you back." She walked out, slamming the door behind her, leaving Jake and me standing in our living room feeling like a tornado had just torn through our lives. Jake slumped onto the couch, his head in his hands. "She can't actually take me away, can she, Mom?" I sat beside him, wrapping my arm around his shoulders. "I won't let that happen, baby. I promise you I will fight this with everything I have." But even as I said the words, I felt a chill of fear run down my spine. Because deep down, I knew that biological mothers, even terrible ones, often had legal advantages that adoptive parents didn't. And Karen had come prepared with lawyers and legal documents and what appeared to be a well-thought-out plan. What I didn't know yet was that Karen's sudden reappearance wasn't about maternal love or second chances. It wasn't even really about Jake at all. There was something she needed, something worth more to her than the son she'd abandoned on a mountain 10 years ago, and she was willing to destroy our family to get it. The court papers arrived 3 days later. Karen hadn't been bluffing. She was suing for full custody of Jake, claiming that her temporary inability to care for him had been resolved and that she was now in a stable marriage with the financial means to provide for him. Her lawyer painted me as a well-meaning but ultimately temporary caregiver who had overstepped boundaries by keeping a mother from her child. Reading those legal documents felt like being punched in the stomach repeatedly. They described Jake as the minor child and me as the defendant. 10 years of love, sacrifice, and devotion reduced to cold legal terminology that made it sound like I'd been babysitting a neighbor's kid. "Mom, you look like you're about to throw up," Jake said, finding me at the kitchen table surrounded by paperwork. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just lawyer stuff." I tried to fold the papers away, but he was 15 now, old enough to understand that his world was potentially about to be turned upside down again. "Let me see them." He reached for the documents before I could stop him. I watched his face change as he read, his jaw tightening with each paragraph. "She's really doing this. She's actually trying to take me away from you. Jake, listen to me." I took his hands in mine. "Whatever happens in court, whatever these papers say, you are my son. You will always be my son. That woman gave birth to you, but I raised you. I chose you every single day for 10 years, and I'll keep choosing you for the rest of my life." But even as I said those words, I felt the fear gnawing at me. Because the truth was, I had no legal claim to Jake. I'd been operating under emergency custody orders that had never been made permanent. In my focus on healing him and giving him stability, I'd somehow never completed the formal adoption process. That oversight might cost us everything. Our lawyer, David Chen, was blunt about our chances. The biological parent almost always has the advantage, especially when they can demonstrate stability and financial capability. Karen's married to a wealthy man now, a real estate developer who's worth several million. She has a nice house, good income, and she's completed all the parenting classes the court required after her previous cases. "What about the abandonment?" I asked. "What about the fact that she left him on a mountain?" "That's our strongest argument, but it happened 10 years ago. Her lawyer will argue that she was young, overwhelmed, and has since rehabilitated herself. They'll focus on her current circumstances, not her past mistakes." Jake was sitting beside me, absorbing every word. What do I get to say in all this? Don't I get a choice? David nodded. At 15, your preference carries significant weight, but it's not determinative. The judge will consider what's in your best interests, which legally often means being with the biological parent if they can provide adequate care. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following month, 4 weeks to prepare for a battle that would determine whether Jake and I could stay together or whether a decade of family would be legally erased. But Karen wasn't content to wait for court. She started showing up everywhere, at Jake's school, at his baseball games, at our grocery store, always with her new husband, Robert, a thin man with calculating eyes who never spoke but seemed to be evaluating everything around him like he was appraising it for purchase. She was at school again today, Jake told me one afternoon, throwing his backpack down with unusual force. Talking to my guidance counselor about getting to know her son better. It's creepy, Mom. She acts like the last 10 years didn't happen. I called the school immediately. Mrs. Patterson, I need to know what Karen Stevens discussed with you today. Oh, Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize there was a custody dispute. She presented herself as Jake's mother who'd been overseas and was trying to reconnect. She seemed very concerned about his academic progress and social development. My blood ran cold. What exactly did you tell her? Just general information about his grades and activities. She already knew he was on the baseball team, so I assumed... Oh no, I may have overstepped, didn't I? Karen was building a case, gathering information about Jake's life to use against me in court. She was systematic about it, methodical in a way that suggested this wasn't impulsive maternal longing, but something far more calculated. The truth about her motivations came from an unexpected source. Robert's ex-wife, Linda Chen, no relation to our lawyer, reached out to me through Facebook. I saw the court filings, she wrote. I was married to Robert Stevens for 8 years. There are things you need to know about why Karen really wants your son back. We met at a coffee shop downtown, and Linda laid out a story that made my stomach turn. Robert's father died 6 months ago and left everything to his grandchildren in trust. The will specifically states that the inheritance only goes to children who are being raised by their biological parents in stable homes. Each grandchild gets $2 million when they turn 18. Jake qualifies for this inheritance. If Karen can prove she's a fit mother and regain custody, yes, Robert married her specifically because he knew about Jake. They've been planning this for months, waiting for the right time to make their move. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Karen's sudden appearance, her expensive clothes, her lawyer, her systematic information gathering, none of it was about wanting Jake back. It was about money. $2 million that she and Robert could control until Jake turned 18. There's more, Linda continued. Robert has a history of financial abuse with his previous wives. He isolates them, controls their access to money, and when they try to leave, he uses his resources to destroy them in court. If Karen gets Jake back, she'll be trapped in that marriage until the inheritance comes through. I felt sick. Jake wasn't a son to them. He was the investment, a very profitable one. Armed with this information, David Chen filed additional motions and requested financial disclosures from both Karen and Robert. But Karen's legal team was prepared for challenges. They had character witnesses, documentation of her completed therapy and parenting classes, and financial statements showing she could provide for Jake. The custody hearing began on a cold Thursday morning in November. Jake sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, pale and nervous, while lawyers and social workers filed past him like he was invisible. I wanted to shield him from all of it, but at 15, he was old enough to understand that his future was being decided by strangers. Karen took the stand first, and I had to admit she was compelling. She spoke about her journey of healing and her deep regret over her past mistakes. She cried appropriately when discussing the pain of being separated from her son, and she painted a picture of a reformed woman who was finally ready to be the mother Jake deserved. I was 23 when I made the worst mistake of my life, she testified, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I was overwhelmed, financially struggling, and in an abusive relationship. I thought I was protecting Jake by taking him somewhere safe where his aunt could find him. The lie was breathtaking in its audacity. She'd rewritten history, turning abandonment into a rescue mission. I've spent the last 10 years getting my life together, completing therapy, learning to be a better person. I'm now in a stable marriage with a man who wants to be Jake's stepfather. We have the resources to give him opportunities his aunt simply cannot provide. When it was my turn to testify, I focused on the facts. 10 years of consistent care, Jake's academic and emotional progress, his integration into our community, his own expressed preferences. But I could see the judge, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes but a stern demeanor, weighing my words against the legal presumption favoring biological parents. Miss Martinez, Karen's lawyer said during cross-examination, you're unmarried, correct? And you've never had children of your own? That's correct. So Jake has been your only experience with child rearing? Yes, but... And you make approximately $45,000 per year as a marketing coordinator? Yes. Whereas my client and her husband have a combined household income of over $300,000. They can provide private school, college tuition, travel opportunities, and experiences that you simply cannot afford. Isn't it possible that your emotional attachment to Jake is preventing you from seeing what would truly be best for him? The question hung in the air like poison. The implication was clear. I was being selfish by wanting to keep Jake in a less privileged environment simply because I loved him. But the judge surprised everyone by asking to interview Jake privately in her chambers. This was our chance, maybe our only chance, for Jake to speak his truth directly to the person who would decide his fate. Jake was in that room for 45 minutes. When he emerged, his face was set with a determination I'd rarely seen in him. Whatever he'd told the judge, he'd said it with conviction. We reconvened the following week for the judge's decision. The courtroom was packed with social workers, court reporters, and observers, but it felt like the entire world had narrowed down to this one moment. This one woman's words that would determine whether Jake and I could remain a family. This is an unusual case, Judge Morrison began, because both parties clearly care about the child's welfare, albeit in different ways. The biological mother has demonstrated significant personal growth and financial stability. The current guardian has provided consistent, loving care during the child's formative years. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. However, several factors have influenced my decision. First, the child's own testimony was compelling and mature. He articulated clear preferences based on his lived experience rather than emotional manipulation from either party. I glanced at Karen, who was gripping Robert's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. Second, the evidence presented regarding the circumstances of Mr. Stevens' inheritance raises questions about the petitioner's motivations that cannot be ignored. While financial resources are important in child rearing, they cannot be the primary consideration when those resources appear to be the driving force behind a custody claim. Karen's face went ashen. Somehow, the judge had seen through their careful facade. Finally, the stability and continuity of the child's current placement weighs heavily in my consideration. Jake Martinez has thrived in Miss Martinez's care for 10 years. He has strong community ties, academic success, and emotional stability. Disrupting this environment would not serve his best interests. I couldn't breathe. Was she saying? Therefore, I am denying the petition for custody modification. Jake will remain in the care of Rebecca Martinez, with whom he will continue to thrive. However, I am also ordering that formal adoption proceedings begin immediately to provide legal security for both parties. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that sounded like freedom. Jake and I held each other and cried right there in the courtroom, while Karen and Robert stormed out, their faces twisted with rage and disbelief. They'd been so certain that money and biological connection would trump love and stability. They'd been wrong. But even as we celebrated, I should have known that people like Karen and Robert don't accept defeat gracefully. They'd lost in court, but they weren't done with us yet. The victory in court should have been the end of our nightmare, but Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. 3 days after the judge's ruling, she and Robert disappeared from town without a trace. Their house was suddenly empty, their social media accounts deleted, and even Karen's lawyer claimed he'd lost contact with them. "It's probably for the best," David Chen told me during our post-trial meeting. "Some people need time to process a loss like this. Maybe they'll resurface eventually, maybe they won't. Either way, Jake is legally safe now." But my instincts were screaming that something was wrong. Karen had fought too hard, invested too much to simply walk away because a judge told her no. She was planning something. I was right to be worried. 2 weeks later, Jake didn't come home from school. Baseball practice ended at 5:30, and he was usually walking through our front door by 6. By 7, I was calling his coach, his teammates, anyone who might know where he was. He left practice with everyone else, Coach Rivera told me. I saw him heading toward the parking lot with his gear bag. By 8 o'clock, I was in full panic mode. Jake was responsible, reliable. He would never just disappear without calling. I drove his usual route home 3 times, checked with every friend I could think of, and finally called the police. "We need to wait 24 hours before filing a missing person report for a teenager," the officer explained. "Kids his age sometimes just need space, especially after stressful situations like custody battles." "You don't understand," I said, my voice rising with desperation. His biological mother just lost a custody case. She threatened to get him back no matter what the court decided. That got their attention. Within an hour, I had 2 detectives at my kitchen table, asking detailed questions about Karen and Robert, their last known addresses, their vehicle descriptions, anything that might help track them down. "Ma'am, do you have any reason to believe they might try to take Jake across state lines?" Detective Williams asked. The question hit me like a physical blow. Oh God, they could be anywhere by now. But Jake is smarter than Karen gave him credit for. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mom, it's Jake. I'm okay, but I can't talk. Truck stop on I-80 near mile marker 247, blue Honda Civic. Tell police Karen has gun." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely show the message to the detectives. Within minutes, they had state police converging on that location, helicopters in the air, and an Amber Alert broadcasting Jake's description across 3 states. The confrontation at the truck stop was brief, but terrifying. Karen had indeed forced Jake into her car at gunpoint after school, but she'd underestimated his intelligence and resourcefulness. He'd managed to send that text while she and Robert were inside the truck stop buying supplies for what appeared to be a planned flight to Mexico. When police surrounded them, Karen's carefully constructed facade finally cracked completely. She was screaming about how the court system was corrupt, how I'd stolen her son, how the inheritance money was rightfully theirs. Robert tried to run and was tackled in the parking lot, while Karen barricaded herself in the truck stop bathroom, still claiming she was just a mother trying to save her child. Jake later told me that during the 3-hour drive, Karen had revealed her true feelings about him. She kept saying how much trouble I was, how this was all my fault for not wanting to live with her. She said if I'd just cooperated, none of this would have been necessary. She never wanted me back, Mom. She just wanted the money. The criminal charges were serious. Kidnapping, crossing state lines with a minor, weapons violations, and attempted flight to avoid prosecution. Karen and Robert were both arrested and held without bail. Their elaborate scheme had collapsed in spectacular fashion, and this time there would be no comeback, no second chances. But the real victory came 6 months later, when Jake and I stood in front of Judge Morrison again, this time for his official adoption. The same courtroom that had been filled with tension and fear was now filled with joy and celebration. Jake's baseball team was there, my colleagues from work, neighbors who'd watched him grow up, and even Coach Rivera, who'd become like a father figure to him over the years. "Jake," Judge Morrison said with a smile, "this is usually when I ask if you understand what adoption means, but I think you understand better than most adults. You've chosen your family, and your family has chosen you. That's what real love looks like." Jake was 17 now, taller than me, with my brother's smile and a confidence that had been hard-won through years of stability and unconditional love. When the judge asked if he wanted to say anything, he stepped forward with the kind of composure that made me incredibly proud. "Your Honor, I want to thank you for seeing the truth 2 years ago, even when it wasn't the easy legal answer. Rebecca Martinez saved my life when I was 5 years old, and she's been saving it every day since. She taught me that family isn't about blood or biology or money. It's about showing up. It's about staying when things get hard. It's about choosing love over everything else." He turned to look at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. "Mom, you could have had an easier life without me. You could have found someone to marry, had your own kids, built the life you planned before I came along. But you chose me instead, every single day for 12 years. Today I get to choose you back, officially and forever." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the court reporter was wiping away tears. The adoption was finalized that day. Jake legally became Jake Martinez Chen. He'd asked to hyphenate our names as a tribute to both families, the one he'd lost and the one he'd gained. We celebrated at his favorite restaurant, surrounded by the people who'd supported us through the darkest moments of our journey. As we drove home that evening, Jake asked me the question I'd been expecting for years. "Mom, do you think I'll ever see Karen again?" I'd thought about this moment many times, preparing different answers depending on his age and emotional readiness. But sitting there with my legally adopted son, who'd grown into such a thoughtful, resilient young man, I decided on simple honesty. Maybe someday, when you're an adult and ready to handle it on your own terms. She's your biological mother, and there might come a time when you want closure or answers that only she can give. But that's your choice to make, and whatever you decide, I'll support you. "I don't hate her anymore," he said quietly. "I used to, especially after the kidnapping, but now I just feel sorry for her. She had a chance to know an amazing kid, and she threw it away for money. That's her loss, not mine." The wisdom in those words took my breath away. Somehow, through all the trauma and chaos, Jake had emerged not with bitterness, but with compassion. Not with anger, but with understanding. He'd learned that love is a choice, that family is built through actions rather than accidents, and that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. 5 years have passed since the adoption. Jake is in college now, studying social work with a specialization in child welfare. He wants to help other kids who've been abandoned or abused, to be the advocate he wishes he'd had when he was 5 years old. He's dating a wonderful girl named Sarah, who makes him laugh and challenges him to be better. He still calls me every Sunday, still comes home for holidays, and still introduces me as my mom with a pride that makes my heart full. Karen was sentenced to 8 years in prison for the kidnapping. Robert got 12 years due to his role as the mastermind and his prior financial crimes. I heard through Linda, Robert's ex-wife, that Karen has written letters asking for Jake's address so she can write to him. Jake knows about the letters, but he's chosen not to read them. He's not ready, and he may never be ready. That's his right. Sometimes people ask me if I regret that night 12 years ago when I got the call about an abandoned child on a mountain. They wonder if I'm sad about the life I didn't have, the husband I didn't meet because I was focused on raising Jake, the biological children I didn't have because all my energy went to healing a broken little boy, the career opportunities I missed because my son needed me more than my ambitions did. The question always makes me smile, because the truth is, I didn't give up my life for Jake. Jake gave me a life I never could have imagined. He taught me that love multiplies rather than divides, that strength comes from service to others, and that sometimes the most important family members are the ones you choose rather than the ones you're born with. Jake Martinez Chen is my son in every way that matters, not because we share DNA, but because we share daily choice to love each other unconditionally, not because a court document says so, but because our hearts decided it 12 years ago and have reaffirmed it every day since. And sometimes, late at night when I'm cleaning up after one of his visits home from college, I think about that terrified little boy on the mountain and marvel at the extraordinary man he's become. Karen abandoned him because she thought he was unwanted, but Jake was never unwanted. He was just waiting for the right person to find him and see his worth. Some stories don't have perfect endings, but they have true ones. And the truth is that family, real family, isn't about blood or biology or legal documents. It's about showing up. It's about staying. It's about choosing love over everything else, even when that choice is difficult, even when it costs you something, even when the world tells you there are easier paths to take. Jake taught me that. And in return, I taught him that he was worth choosing, worth fighting for, worth loving completely and unconditionally. That's what real family looks like. And we built it together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of love at a time.